Hey YouTube, Not So Slim Jim coming to you in the next installment of the Budget 50 BMG build. Now as you can tell, we have an optic here, and I'm going to go over exactly why I went with this optic. Now obviously, we're looking at a budget build, and I looked quite a bit to try to find something that is in the overall inexpensive optic that will work for 50 BMG. Now, of course, if you go to any of the posts where people talk about it and what they use, and they're putting these, $2,000-$3,000 a night Force or high-end Leopolds and things like that on their $10,000 plus Barretts. And if you can afford that, by all means, go with it. But this entire project, I am trying to keep as inexpensive as possible and getting away with something that will work but won't break the bank. So after some research and talking to other guys who have run this exact same optic on bolt action 50 BMGs, who have had them on there for a few years and hundreds of rounds without any issues, I went ahead and decided to go with this Athlon. Now this is a 6x24 30 millimeter tube with a 50 millimeter objective on the end. It is a mil-spec scope. It does have illumination on it, which I rarely ever use illumination, but it's there. I did play around with it. Its ability to focus anywhere from 10 yards to infinity is really quite nice. I saw some reviews about this optic saying that anything past about 18x isn't very clear. And I guess compared to high-end optics, that may be realistic, but honestly, I've looked through this versus some of my Vortex, my Leopolds, and it's not bad. It really, for the kind of shooting I'm going to do, like maybe if you're trying to shoot out to 1,000+ yards, this may not be your optic. But for what I'm going to be doing, 800 or less, this has zero issues whatsoever. Now, let's talk about will this survive the recoil of the 50 BMG. Now, I did some researching, and this is, according to Athlon, supposed to be rated for 1,000 G of recoil. Now, I didn't know what 1,000 G of recoil is until I looked up a calculator, which I'm going to go ahead and add up here for you guys to look at, where it talks about where you add the grain of the bullet, the amount of powder, the weight of the firearm itself, then you add in the length of the barrel and all the everything together. And by using the heaviest grain round I could possibly get, I'm sure they make something even heavier, but randomly available is the 850 grain. With the max load I know they make for the 660 grain ball ammo, with the barrel of this rifle, with the weight of it, with this optic, even with no muzzle brake, which this muzzle brake is supposed to have somewhere between 30 and 50% efficiency on it, it's still only half of what this optic is rated for. Now, this does come with a lifetime warranty, so if for some reason I do break this, I can just send it back to the manufacturer for another one. And if it doesn't hold up very well, I can trade in for another one and upgrade to a larger optic. So this will do at least for now. Now, when it comes to rings, once again, I'm a budget guy. I'm not going to spend, $400, $450, depending upon where you find it on sale, for this optic, and then spend $200 on a set of rings. And laugh if you must, I went with Monstrum. And you know what? I've run these. I have a set of Monstrum rings on my 45-70, which I shoot my 1-ounce destroyer shoulders loads with, and I put them on shotguns. And everything I've ever run Monstrum rings on, if you're installed properly, I have never had an issue. These are their heavy-duty 3-screw lockdown, minus the one that's got the bubble gauge on it. It's only got 2 on that side. Heavy-duty lockdown rings that I tested on the scope, and it has good contact area, and I don't think these are going to have any issues whatsoever with locking down. So let's go ahead and get this mounted on the rifle, go through the procedure and how to do this properly, and get it done. All right, now we're moving on to the actual mounting itself. Now, normally if you have an AR or some kind of platform that has a long pick rail on it, you can use one of these really easy to use Picatinny rail bubbles that you can see here. You just mount somewhere down here further on the rail and use that as your baseline for what your actual level is. Now, because we have a very short section and I'm going to need this entire section to be able to mount it, what you need to do is, I found out that the top holes here are actually not drilled perfectly aligned for level bubble. So what I did is I put a flat neodymium magnet and I adjusted it until I had the rail and the rifle both correctly in bubble with each other. Now I need to mount the lower part of the caps. All right, now that we have the scope mounted where we want for the proper R relief, we have the Loctite, which for this application is an absolute must. Don't use red, or if you ever do have to take this off, it's gonna be difficult. Blue only. We have it in place. Now, I have my magnetic mount, but because the turret is made of aluminum and brass, it doesn't stick, so hence you see my pretty blue tape. What we need to do at this point is we need to rotate it so it's on there very loosely. Correct with the one in the bottom. Now, this isn't the most sturdy lockdown rig, so I do have to do fine adjustments and make sure they match on both bubbles. Which, on an average ring, you have 2 lockdowns. So you do an X pattern like you would on a 4-bolt car, where you go, right front, left back, right back, right front. I don't know how this new camera. Anyways, that's how you do it. And then you would tighten them down just barely snug. Now these are going to go down to 18 inch-pounds, so I'd go to 10 inch-pounds, 15 inch-pounds, 18 inch-pounds. In that star pattern, you do one side, the other side, then 10, then the 10, then 15, then 15, then 18, and 18. But because this is 3, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go 1, or so inside, outside, outside, inside, center, center. And because I don't want to make this video too boring, I'm going to do that off camera. But remember, when you're doing it the whole time, to keep an eye on your bubbles, because as you tighten it down, it can cause the optic to shift. Especially if you have one of the aerial precision clamp optics that goes on the side, those things will rotate your optic a good 5 degrees. So make sure to, every time you torque it down a little bit, every torque you do where you change sides, check your bubbles and make sure it hasn't changed, because if you do, you're going to have to adjust it a little bit. So let me go ahead and get that done. All right, another thing I forgot to mention, during the initial clamp down, when you're first putting the bolts in, make sure to look for spacing between the upper cap and lower cap or base when you're putting them on. You want to make sure that that gap between the cap and the base are about as equal as possible on both sides. Otherwise, you're going to have a uneven clamping force. So go slowly back and forth until you get them even on both sides, and then you can bring them down to they're just barely tight, and then little snug, and then start doing your torque pattern, and that'll keep them from going down. So now, after it's all done, as I said, we are bubble on top and bottom, so we know it's going to be correct up and down, at least for the distance that I'm going to be shooting. If I was shooting further, I would be using a machinist bubble, which I have, but for this setup would be difficult to try to align. I'm not going to shoot this for at least 48 hours for everything to set up. I am going to laser bore sight this. I don't want to make this video super long, So if you want to see how to do that, there are plenty of videos that are going to be doing it better than I can. And as usual, you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them down in the comment section.